All right, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Welcome to our Chicagoland Trail webinar series and our kickoff event to talk about the Des Plaines River Trail. My name is Maggie Shawinski from the Active Transportation Alliance, and the Des Plaines River Trail, we thought this would be a great way to get started on this series because it is a huge priority for our region. It's been the focus of several recent studies, and if those studies are realized, the trail would connect the Salt Creek Trail to the Illinois Prairie Path and connect many communities in our region all the way to the Wisconsin border. So it's an important trail. However, there are some major gaps that need to be sorted out first, and we have some outstanding speakers here today to speak more about what is being done to eliminate those gaps and improve the trail, and thinking about how we can all work together to see this trail to completion. So before we jump into the details of the trail, just some housekeeping items. So we are recording this webinar today. We'll be sharing slides and the recording afterwards. And if you have any questions for our speakers, you can use the chat box and we'll address questions as we're able, as time allows, at the end of the webinar. And if you need it, closed captioning is available. And also please stay tuned for future trail webinars. This is a series, so we're planning to host a few of these webinars throughout the summer. Some trails we would like to highlight include the Englewood Nature Trail, the Major Taylor Trail, the Burnham Greenway, the Weber Spur, the East Branch DuPage River Trail, and beyond. So please stay tuned for announcements about those future webinars. And I also wanted to highlight a few events that are going on right now. So it is Chicago Bike Month right now. It's May. And shout out to FK Law, who's our title sponsor. And it's also National Bike Month. And there are events going on all over the city, all over the suburbs. And you can find out more at activetrans.org/bike month. There's a film screening coming up, more bike rides coming up, some big parties, celebrations. So it's a fun thing to be involved in. And then one other event, this is our big fundraiser of the year, Fifth Third Bike the Drive. So it's when Lakeshore Drive is shut down to bikes only. And it's a beautiful event, highly recommend it, especially if you've never done it before. It's on September 3rd this year. And registration is open now, so you can go to bikethedrive.org to get your ticket, and we hope to see you there. And with that, I'm going to pass it along to my colleague Alex Perez, who's going to share a bit of an overview about the Des Plaines River Trail projects and studies.
Thanks, Maggie. So my name is Alex Perez. I am an advocacy manager at the Active Transportation Alliance, and just reiterating what Maggie said, kind of completing the Des Plaines River Trail is a high priority for us. Not only will you be able to get to Wisconsin, but it will also complete that gap within the communities. So you'll be able to get from Ogden to Toohey, which is about like a 15-mile stretch, connecting the different communities in there. So kind of how did we get here? It kind of started from our project that we're working on in the central area. So it is a 2.5-mile gap between the Forest Park CTA Blue Line Station at Van Buren, going south to 26th Street. And we got an Invest in Cook grant, just a quick overview from the Cook County to work with Civiltech as our engineering partners to do a feasibility study for this stretch. And just to get a little bit into the weeds, because of flooding being a major issue, we did decide to go a little bit more into on-street options to fill in the gap. So from doing that engagement of doing stakeholder meetings and community engagement, we were hearing also about how do we connect to the northern section, how do we connect to the southern section. So that's kind of where it kind of came to be of how do we get a better understanding of what's happening beyond just our study area. So just to the north of us, it's a 10-mile stretch that has been worked on with the Forest Preserve, Cook County, and Christopher Burke Engineering. So they've had several engineering projects in this stretch to work on improvements for trail users' experience and safety. And then to the south of us, CMAP, the Chicago Metropolitan Planning Agency, has been leading a planning study, led a planning study in 2019 to fill in the gap between 26th Street and Ogden. And There's a lot of key destinations between these communities as well too. So you'll be able to connect the Illinois Prairie Path, the Saw Creek Trail, Miller Meadows, the Medical District, Brookfield Zoo. So these are all key destinations that people will be able to access if this trail is to be completed. Next slide. And then just a quick introduction for our speakers. First off, we'll be going in order from north to south. So we have Mike Kerr, president of Christopher Burke Engineering. We have Lissa Sweeney, planner at Civiltech Engineering. Ralph DiFebo, a community advocate and longtime resident. And Emily Egan, who is a community development director at the Village of Brookfield. And just a FYI, if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A and chat box, and we'll get to them at the end of the presentation. And without further ado, I would kick it off to Mike Kerr.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for attending the webinar. I'm giving a brief presentation on the northern piece of the Des Plaines River Trail between Toohey Avenue and the Illinois Prairie Path. My slide advance isn't working. There we go. Project background. The original study area when we started this project was from Toohey Avenue to North Avenue, where the existing trail ends. During public involvement, it was determined that the River Forest would like to extend that further to the Prairie Path. So we added that into the Prairie Path, lengthened the study an additional 2 miles. The phase 1 study that we performed built off of the intergovernmental coalition that was started by Active Trans and Franklin Park and many of the communities throughout the corridor. The majority of the path, as you know, is located in the Forest Reserve District of Cook County. And in this section of trail, every major cross street is under IDOT jurisdiction. Next slide. This is the Trail Advisory Group. As I said, many communities along the Des Plaines River Trail are instrumental in moving this forward. Of note are Mayor Peterson and Franklin Park, the forest preserves themselves, and all the other communities pitched in. Next slide. So the scope of the improvements in this section was trail reconstruction or realignment where the trail flooded many times per year. New and improved crossings of the arterial streets. We're hoping for grade separations or realigning the path to an existing signal so cyclists can safely cross these major streets. Because of the amount of floodplain, there are portions of the trail on boardwalk and structure. And where we had an opportunity to provide new connections to the trails, we did so. Next slide. Real briefly, the major crossings, as I said, are all under IDOT jurisdiction. Many of them are underpasses. The majority are underpasses with one signal. The problem with the underpasses is that they're flooded a vast majority of the year in some years, causing the cyclists to go up and over and scramble across one of these busy roads mid-block. So it was a pretty large safety concern. Next slide. Here you can just see some of the underpasses and mid-block crossings that we are trying to eliminate or improve. Again, when the river comes up, it stays up, and many of these facilities are unusable, causing cyclists to just cross at unmarked locations. Next slide. So I won't go into great detail in this slide, but we evaluated all of the alignments and all the crossings based on engineering, environmental, and public criteria, rated those with the Trail Advisory Group, and selected our preferred alternative. At this point, the phase 1 was 12 miles long. We felt that was too long to start to implement any of the projects. So we broke it into 3 separate phase 1s. The first phase 1 was from Toohey to Irving Park, then Irving Park to North, and then North on down to the Prairie Parkway. The reason for doing this is so that we could stagger the improvements and try to get some things under construction. Yeah, next slide. So we got design approval for segments 1 through 4, which was Toohey to Irving Park, which allowed us to pursue funding for these sections. Segment 1 between Toohey and Devon, Park Ridge submitted an ITEP application for phase 2 engineering and construction, which they obtained. That section is currently under construction as we speak. Should be done by August of this year. Segment 2 from Devon Avenue to Bryn Mawr, Rosemont submitted an ITEP application that was granted for phase 2 engineering and construction. We had the pre-con for that last week. So that will be shortly starting construction and again be completed by August. Segment 3, the Forest Preserve itself submitted an ITEP application for phase 2 engineering and a CMAQ application for phase 2 engineering, construction of segment 3 and construction of segment 4. That is also under construction. That one's exciting because it includes an overpass of Lawrence Avenue and a pretty significant boardwalk. Segment 4, Schiller Park applied for the ITEP application and received phase 2 engineering. We are still waiting for those agreements to be approved. So the good news here is 3 of the 4 segments in the north part are under construction, will be completed this year, which we felt was important. Next slide. So the segments 5 to 7 from Irving Park to North Avenue is still in phase 1 engineering. We expect design approval by the end of this year. There are some ARC sites and some other sensitive environmental resources that require this one to maybe be on a different track than the first 4. Next slide. And then finally, the last segment is segments 8 through 10 from North Avenue to Madison. As it turns out, this section ends up being largely on river forest streets. The section of Forest Preserve between North Avenue and Madison is some of their most sensitive holdings. So it was not desirable to go through there. So we're looking at 2-way cycle tracks and bike paths along and shared lanes along Thatcher down to Madison, cycle track on Madison, and then a standalone project that the Village of Forest Park is doing along Van Buren to get us down to the Prairie Path. That's my presentation. Like I said, we hope to have at least 3 of the 10 segments done this year. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Mike, for the overview of what's going up there. It's helpful to get a clear picture of all of the many components. So next up, we have Lissa Sweeney, who's going to be speaking about the central area that Alex was sharing at the beginning of the webinar and the feasibility study that is currently happening.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Maggie.
Lissa, if you double click, you might be able to control the slides. I think yeah, okay, good.
Okay, great. Yeah, so thank you again to Active Transportation Alliance for holding this discussion today and for inviting us to be a part of it. As Maggie and Alex mentioned, I'm Lissa Sweeney with Civiltech Engineering, and I'll talk about the central portion of the Des Plaines River Trail studies. It's currently ongoing, but we are planning on wrapping up the feasibility study this summer. So the central study focuses on the portion just south of what Mike had discussed. So it intends to close the 2.5-mile trail gap between the Forest Park Blue Line Station and 26th Street near the Salt Creek Trail. It's funded through Invest in Cook, and it is being led by Active Transportation Alliance with our support. The overall goals of the study are to identify and determine the feasibility of either a dedicated trail through Forest Preserve property, or alternative low-stress on-street routes through Maywood, Broadview, Forest Park, or North Riverside. It was also important to engage multiple stakeholders throughout the study and to identify implementation steps. So just taking a look at this timeline, we began the study in early 2022, and over the past year, a little over a year, we have conducted existing conditions research, community engagement. We've been developing trail alignments and evaluating them both internally as well as with our steering committee, and then really refining those and determining the prioritization of those finalized trail alignments to then progress into the next stage. During this time, we've also had multiple steering committee meetings, pop-up meetings, and most recently a public meeting. We are currently wrapping up the final report, and we're working with the Active Transportation Alliance in Cook County to move the project to the next stage. So just briefly in terms of community engagement, in addition to our steering committee, we did attend some local events last fall to hear from the community. So this included a party for the preserves as well as Tour de Proviso. And at those meetings, we kind of promoted both our wiki map and our survey to get some more information from the community as to what issues are out there today and what they'd like to see in the future. So at these events and then through these tools virtually, we had 325 survey respondents and over 150 comments about routes, difficult crossings, and destinations. We heard locations where crossings should be improved, as well as improved access to destinations in and near the study area. Other concerns included sidewalk gaps, busy or dangerous driving, as well as trail flooding. So combining this feedback with our existing conditions analysis and steering committee input, we identified 4 trail alignments. And so, we'll go through these, one at a time, but here you can see an overview of all 4 of them, where 3 kind of run west of the Des Plaines River and 1 falls east. And so alignment 1 really takes advantage of the existing Miller Meadow Trail. And so kind of just moving briefly from north to south, we connect from the Illinois Prairie Path and then via proposed Mark Shared Lane, go down 9th Avenue, connect to Roosevelt, where there could be potentially a side path on the southern side of Roosevelt, connecting to Miller Meadow. And then progressing over the railroad crossing via existing crossing and a side path onto Cermak, where we then connect to 3rd Avenue and 26th Street. Alignment 2 kind of takes a similar route on the northern and southern ends with 9th Avenue and 3rd Avenue. But instead of connecting to Miller Meadow, we connect to the medical district and actually use the frontage road within the medical district as well as 2nd Avenue, and then kind of come out around 17th Street and connect to 1st Avenue there. And so you'll see on here too, the blue circles just representing kind of those connection points where we're hoping to have the destinations connected. Alignment 3 utilizes the Des Plaines Avenue, where there is an existing bike route, albeit from community feedback, not a very comfortable one. So this would potentially entail a road diet where we would look at reducing the number of lanes from 4 to 3 in order to provide either a bike lane or a side path along Des Plaines Avenue and then connect to an existing bike lane on 26th Street. And then we have alignment 4, which really both connects to existing trails and moves, I guess, utilizes the Salt Creek Trail to a greater degree. So moving that a little bit further west, or connecting to it further west. And then there are current program side path on 25th Avenue, as well as a planned on-street bike route on 14th Street. So really our connection would just be along 9th Avenue. So once we had those kind of 4 alignments, we assessed them using evaluation criteria, which reviewed user experience, community connectivity, environmental considerations, right-of-way impacts, engineering feasibility, and some other factors. And overall alignment 2, which went through the medical district, kind of had the best overall score. Alignment 1 utilizes the current trail in Miller Meadow, but does not have 24-hour access. Alignment 4 connects to planned and programmed bike routes and would have a fairly low cost to implement, but it's less of a direct connection to the study destinations. And then alignment 3 on Des Plaines Avenue, while one of the most direct options, would be the most complicated and expensive due to the road diet and potential right-of-way impacts. So with all that being said, really what we heard from the community and from our analysis is that all of these have merit. Each alignment connects to different destinations, provides opportunities for different types of trail users. So instead of just selecting one, we've prioritized them, with the first priority being alignment 4, which is essentially just the connection down 9th Avenue to 14th Street, followed by the alignment through Miller Meadow and the medical district, and then the Des Plaines Avenue alignment. And just taking a step back and looking at all these alignments together, you can see how they build off one another, but also serve different purposes and connections to the larger trail network to the north and south. And we've also developed a few location-specific concepts just to show on-the-ground improvements and connection points at a few more complex intersections or crossings where we've heard a lot of feedback from the community. For the sake of time, I'll just touch on a couple of these, but they are available on the project website. And this first one, I believe that Ralph will speak to a little bit more, but there is a current Cook County project at Maybrook and First Avenue, which repeatedly comes up from the community as a dangerous crossing without any east-west connections. Then at Roosevelt Road and 9th Avenue, which would be utilized for at least 2 of the alignments, we propose upgrading sidewalk striping, adding pedestrian signals and push buttons, and adding a side path on the south side of Roosevelt. This would require some right-of-way acquisition or easement to shift the fence by Hines VA. So you'll see that here this is a rendering of that specific location. So you could see the upgraded striping as well as the side path on the south side of Roosevelt. And then the second location that we'll look at is a concept at First Avenue between the railroad crossing and Cermak. So you can see a proposed side path on the east side of First Avenue, along with additional pedestrian signals, push buttons, and exploring the possibility of reducing lane widths on Cermak to accommodate a side path on the south side. So you can see another view of this via the rendering, but in this view, we're facing south. And so you'll see the side path going down First Avenue on the left-hand side, crossing over the railroad tracks and connecting to Cermak. Great. So then just looking at next steps again and our timeline, we are drafting our final report right now and expect it to be distributed this summer, and more information is available on the project website. So thank you again. Look forward to answering some questions at the end of the presentation.
Great, thanks, Lissa. And so with that, let's bring on Ralph, who will speak more about the portion of this project near between the CTA station and the Illinois Prairie Path. So Ralph, we have to get you unmuted. Uh-oh. There we go, I think.
Okay, am I in now?
There you are. Hi, Ralph.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Maggie, can you hit the first slide, please? Thank you. In the central study area, gaps exist between the Prairie Path, Salt Creek Path, CTA, and the proposed Thatcher or Des Plaines River Trail. Why close these gaps? Well, in real estate, I used to say location, location, location. Now I would say safety, safety, safety. It's a matter of providing safe passage for bikers and walkers where we can. We want to provide safe crossings at arterial roads, improve trail connections between the suburbs, improve access to mass transit, get bikes out of traffic, put them on off-street paths when we can, and get them into bike lanes when we can. And just to increase in general bike riders, the ridership, whether it's for recreation or going back and forth to work. Next slide, please. The Illinois Prairie Path was the first designed rails to trails plan in the United States, and it was the second one built. It was opened in 1965, but it was built in segments. It wasn't built all at once. If you look at the map, this is from the Illinois Prairie Path Corporation. The section from the trailhead at First Avenue to the CTA Blue Line is dashed, meaning that this was a segment that was never built. But it is the gap that we are currently trying to close in order to connect the Des Plaines River Trail and the Blue Line to the Prairie Path and the Salt Creek Path. Next slide, please. Here is an aerial photograph that sort of describes the area that we're talking about. Starting at the far left, you have the Prairie Path trailhead. And at the far right, I have it as a proposed Thatcher Woods. I realize it's a Des Plaines River Trail and the CTA Blue Line. And in between, you have Maybrook Drive. You have an existing bicycle path in Forest Park that leads to the CTA parking lot. What I want to call special attention here, because it's part of our group's plan of what we would like to see, is there is a long, skinny parking lot that's owned by the Maybrook Courthouse. It's seldomly used. It's not, it's always empty. Next slide, please. How to close this gap. We've been working with Commissioner Brandon Johnson, Cook County Commissioner Brandon Johnson, for the last 6 years on this, a group of local citizens. And what we have come up with was to, if you follow the dashed line, is to extend the trail that goes over the river to the CTA parking lot with a bike path going to the north half of the county parking lot. And at the end, cutting over to Maybrook Drive in about a 10-foot wide path running to First Avenue. This isn't the tricky part. The tricky part is our next slide. Maggie, please. What can I say about the intersection at First Avenue? We would like to create a safe crosswalk across First Avenue. Right now, there is no crosswalk. The light there is for a left arrow and a right arrow. And so either way a biker comes down there, they're violating the green light by being there, because traffic never stops. Can you see in the small triangle, there's a sign for the Cook County Courthouse? It's something else that we found to be dangerous because it blocks the view of cars and bicyclists alike so that they can't see each other beyond the sign. And if somebody is using the right turn lane off of First Avenue, sometimes at higher speeds, they may not see a bicyclist or cyclist behind the sign, and vice versa. The cyclist may not ever see the automobile as well. Now, right now, CDOT and IDOT are discussing a new intersection for this area. And one potential one that we liked was by putting the crosswalk at the north side of the street and creating a widened sidewalk going from that crosswalk west of First Avenue down to the trailhead for the Prairie Path. And on the opposite side of the street, to have a new 10-foot side path built from First Avenue to the courthouse parking lots, which we hope to create the path that runs all the way to the Blue Line and to the Des Plaines River Trail. Why is this so important, this particular link that our group has been working on? We feel that if we want to connect the Salt Creek Path and the Prairie Path to the Des Plaines River Path and the Blue Line, this is a very important segment to get done because it's the most logical of all of the options we have to connect those two, and they all are going to use this section of path. Thank you, guys. I wanted to keep it brief and be able to answer questions later. So thank you very much for giving me the opportunity.
Super. Thanks so much, Ralph. We appreciate your work on this and your enthusiasm. And again, thank you, Lissa, for the overview of the central study area. We're very excited about seeing this section of the trail and these important connections move forward. So we'll be working on this for a number of years to come, but we know that Cook County, that this is an important priority for Cook County. So with that, I will pass it over to Emily Egan, who is the Community Development Director from the Village of Brookfield.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you, Maggie. Thank you, everyone. As Maggie said, I'm Emily Egan. I'm here in Brookfield, and just again, thank you so much for holding this event and getting the word out about all this good work. Very exciting. Thank you. So actually, I'm going to skip over this slide because Alex gave us a great overview, and now you are all very familiar with the two portions that are north of our subject area. And this is our subject area here. This is a description of the areas that we're focusing on in the southern portion. You can see Ogden Avenue there, and then just above that diagonal, that's the BNSF tracks that goes through all of our communities here. And then on the top, you'll see two red stars, and the red star that's to the left of your screen, that is the eastern trailhead of the Salt Creek Trail. So that is just in the northern area of Brookfield. Brookfield is on the north side of your screen. Riverside and Lyons, or Brookfield is on the left side of your screen. Riverside and Lyons, that's on the right side of your screen. So that Salt Creek Trailhead, that's an amazing asset you all probably are aware of, about 30 miles west from that point where that star is. And then the other star there, that is actually the entrance to Brookfield Zoo. So that is where their bicycle entrance is, as well as the majority of where their parking is. And then there's an underpass from where that parking, that bicycle entrance is, that goes south to where the exhibits and all the entertainment is underneath 31st Street. So that's really the area we're looking at. And it's really four major segments. The 31st Street segment near the zoo and the Salt Creek Trail, Washington Avenue, which goes all the way through Brookfield. And then those two portions a little south, it's both the border of Riverside and Brookfield, as well as some forest preserve property. And then the bottom right hand, those two orangish color portions that are largely in the Village of Lyons. So now you know what we're talking about, and I will just dig right into how this came to be. How did we get here? So I'm going to go way back in time, back to 2017. This is specific to Brookfield. We had a grant that allowed us to work with the Active Transportation Alliance to do a plan to make biking and walking in Brookfield safer and more convenient. We had a lot of great engagement. Brookfield is a very bicycle friendly community. And so on the right hand side, you'll see the community engagement results, which really prioritize 31st Street and Washington Avenue as areas that need improvements for biking and pedestrian activity. That feedback we got, these are some heat maps, and if you can see 31st Street and Washington continue to be priority areas for the community to focus on improvements, not only for destinations like the zoo and the Salt Creek Trail, but also for safety. Safety. I like what you said, Ralph. So yeah, so there's a lot of good engagement we saw in 2017, and we saw that there was a clear need for some improvements. And then we were really happy to see that a lot of other communities agreed with that. The Forest Preserves of Cook County, they engaged CMAP through the Local Technical Assistance Grant application to do a study in 2019 after the Brookfield study came to be that looked at this and really studied the feasibility, the location, and all of that. And then on your right hand side, you know, that's the Brookfield plan specifically, but a lot of other regional plans. So lots of engagement, a clear understanding that this is what the community wants, and plans are recognizing this. So we were very excited. Very shortly after the CMAP and the Forest Preserve Plan got adopted in 2019, we entered into an intergovernmental agreement in 2019. And this agreement was to move beyond the plans and to go through the phase 1 engineering for implementing these plans, for getting something done that it was clear there was a consensus to do. So that intergovernmental agreement said that we would all work together, and we would work with a professional consulting firm, engineering and planning firm. We chose to work with CIORBA. That's the firm that is guiding all of these agencies that are in that list here: Village of Brookfield, LaGrange Park, Lyons, Riverside, and the Forest Preserves of Cook County. CIORBA is guiding us all through how to implement these plans that we've all agreed on. So very exciting. In 2019, we are getting to work. We're going to get some stuff done. We're having a phase 1 engineering. Seems like everything's going great, right? Well, actually, maybe not. Here we are, 2023. I wish I could report on more successes, but I do have to comment on some of the challenges that this project has seen. So even though we have an intergovernmental agreement with the Forest Preserves at Cook County, there have been some staffing changes. Unfortunately, the Forest Preserves, Kendi Kruller was their planner, and she was very involved with the plans and the recommendations and this project specifically. She left to move on to other wildly successful career adventures, and unfortunately, she has not yet been replaced. There are staffing limitations, and we unfortunately are, you know, working through that institutional gap in knowledge with the Forest Preserves. We've had some fantastic support from staff there who really aren't even assigned to this project, but are familiar with it, and they're advocating for it, and they're helping us through it. But we don't have that key point person with that institutional knowledge, unfortunately. But I know the Forest Preserves, they did get that referendum passed, and hopefully with that, we'll see more capacity for staff and more support for their staff as they move. So we're working with IDOT. All of these portions, except for the Washington Avenue portion, are within IDOT right-of-way. And we're, to be really frank, we're struggling to understand some of the conditions and requirements that are being requested from IDOT, and why this project is something that those items are being requested. And we see other trails that are existing in the region that didn't have that requirement. So just to be really honest, you know, hopefully we'll get through that process with IDOT a little bit more smoothly, but that has certainly been a challenge, those perceived new requirements from IDOT. Keeping municipalities engaged. This project is taking a long time. We've had staff turnover in Lyons specifically, and you know, the staff has been great to work with, but I think we need more support from leadership in Lyons to keep them engaged, to keep this as something that they see as a regional benefit as well as a benefit to Lyons specifically. So that's been a challenge of a very multi-year long project, difficult for anyone to stay engaged. You know, to that end, just coordinating any project with 4 different municipalities, with IDOT, with the Forest Preserves of Cook County, with that CZS is Chicago Zoological Society, the Brookfield Zoo. You know, all of these entities, we need clear communication with them. And it's really challenging to get everyone together in the room and think through, as we're going through this phase 1, you know, who is going to maintain these? You know, the initial IGA brought us from the plan to the implementation, but it didn't yet think that far ahead where we're looking at who's going to maintain the path, who's going to pay to construct it. How do we get from just the plans and ideas to real on the ground work, right? So all of this adds up to, you know, limited staff capacity for Brookfield, certainly, but all of the other agencies involved. And a delayed project means financial resources are limited. This is at least 2 years behind project. That means 2 years of meetings with Siorba. And really, to be frank with everyone, we are over budget, and we see this as a potential barrier to getting this project to the finish line. But I don't want to focus on the challenges. I do think that we have a path to success. We are extremely thankful that we have been recently in conversation with Cook County's Department of Transportation and of Highways, Transportation and Highways. Essentially, that Cook County organization recognizes the benefit of this project, and not only the regional benefit, but the statewide benefit, honestly. So they've been extremely supportive and encouraging, and we're working through the commitment that they've offered to bridge the gap in funding from what was initially discussed with all those partners and what is needed to get it to the finish line. So we're really excited for that. And then also just support from Active Transportation Alliance, events like this, bringing awareness to this, elected officials, and Cycle Brookfield. Cycle Brookfield is a nonprofit bicycle advocacy organization here in Brookfield, and they do so much for the community. And they're also really supportive of this project and encouraging. So we do have a path to success. We are still optimistic about how to get there. And just super quickly, I'll just, I know we're getting close on time. So I just want to speak briefly to why are we doing this? What, like, I always try to remind myself, what is the goal here? I will say this portion in yellow, it's less than half a mile. And that half a mile is a barrier for the majority of residents in Brookfield to safely get to these key regional destinations like the Brookfield Zoo and the Salt Creek Trail without having to drive. And that is a failure, I believe, in a lot of different agencies. That half a mile, you can see on 31st Street, there is already a pedestrian bicyclist bridge that was built when this roadway was constructed with that in mind, but it is not accessible. It is not maintained. It's a dead end. There's no connection there. So working through this, why are we doing this? We're making it safer and convenient for folks to get to, here's the bicycle entrance for the zoo, and then also the Forest Preserve's easternmost trailhead. You see that there's a path there where folks are already walking and biking to this destination, and they're doing it, unfortunately, without that infrastructure support to make it safer and more convenient. So just to recap, we're working very diligently on all of these portions of the project. I will mention that right now, thankfully, Washington Avenue, that's a connection to all of these other regional areas, that is being constructed as we speak. We're adding bike lanes to the north and south side of Washington Avenue. That's a locally controlled street by Brookfield. So that was able to move forward a little bit faster than other portions. So this was the timeline PowerPoint slide I had for a presentation I gave maybe a year ago. Crossed out. We're not going with that timeline, but we are still moving forward. I hope to be able to report on successes and final deliverables to IDOT, you know, at the end of this year or early next year. That's a quick summary of what we're working on here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Emily. That it was. We appreciate like hearing the background, the you know, the inside story of like what's going on here, and we know it's frustrating and it's complicated, and we so appreciate you being a champion for this trail in the village of Brookfield, your leadership and trying to help move this forward. And you know, it requires a lot of people, so hopefully with more support, we'll see some dates on your previous slides soon, and we'll see this actually built. So appreciate it, Emily, everything you do. So with that, we did want to open it up. There are, it looks like, a handful of questions, so I'm going to pass it along to Alex to ask our speakers some of the questions that came in.
Yeah, thanks, Maggie. And thank you to our speakers for their time to go through their slides, and thank you to the people who have presented some questions. Emily, I'm gonna throw some at you that are kind of recent. So one, love that there's a bicycle entrance at Brookfield Zoo. I had no idea. Can a cargo bike fit through there?
Oh, that is a wonderful question. I am not sure the answer to. I think so. I do believe so, having been through that entrance myself, but I'd be happy to confirm and get back to you if that's possible.
Yeah, that is fine. Another question for you: was North Riverside government approach for input or collaboration?
North Riverside?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I believe they were early on during the planning stages, the regional planning stages, but at this time during the engineering, not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
If anyone from Riverside asked that question, please reach out to me. I'm happy to chat with you if you do have some input. I would love that.
And then another question that you kind of got to already, kind of what about volunteers? How can they help build the path sections? One thing that you mentioned was reaching out to elected officials. If you want to add anything else or anyone else, I think that's kind of one good way for volunteers to help out and kind of stay inactive with events like this, so they can know what are updates.
Absolutely. I think that's a great recommendation to keep it as a priority and keep it on the front and center of not only local elected officials, but regional as well and state. Yeah, absolutely. That'd be phenomenal.
And then moving on to the central section, I see there being a lot of sentiment with the danger and unsafetiness with the crossing at First and Maybrook. So just want to reiterate that for people who are commenting on that. And then a question for Ralph, probably for Lissa as well too. What is the current status and next steps for the missing Perry Path connection? Is the county actively planning to implement any of the new path at First Avenue crosswalk?
Alex, can you hear me now?
Yep, we can hear you.
All right. Thanks for the question. As far as I know, IDOT and CDOT are in negotiations as to, or discussions on how that intersection is going to be changed. When they find something out, that's when we'll be able to start looking at how the concrete routing of where the path is going to be. Right now, we are under the impression it was going to be on the north side of the intersection. If they change that, if it goes to the south, then we would have to do a little bit more mapping. But as far as I know, and Lissa, maybe you know more than I do, we're still waiting on a decision from the County Transportation Department and IDOT as to what they think they can do to First Avenue.
Yeah, that's correct. We had a conversation, I believe, with Cook County in the last week or two, and that design that was shown on there is the latest. But with that being said, they are just working through internally kind of what those next steps would be. So a project is in place, but the kind of next steps and timeline are to be determined.
Great. Just kind of another comment from someone. My personal thoughts is that alignment 1, 2, and 4 seem pretty out of the way. I like alignment 3 because it is direct, which in my opinion legitimizes biking and micromobility as a valid form of transportation. I often use trails in the area to get from point A to point B, not just for recreation. Just to add on to a little bit of that, kind of the difference between the alignments was kind of crossing for major roads was kind of a big barrier. So that's one of the reasons why alignments were kind of pushed a little bit to the west for crossing major roads, especially the ones that have high vehicle volumes. Let me see. I think that is good for the central. Emily, just going back to you for one more question. Why is the river forest section on Off Street when there is wonderful forest preserve for a path?
The river forest section, is okay if I go back to?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. I wonder, maybe this kind of yellow, are folks talking about this yellow section in the middle next to where it says 171? Is that, I don't, because it is true that is partially owned by Forest Preserves of Cook County, but there's not a path through there currently. It's basically the border of Riverside and Brookfield, and does have Forest Preserve land, but there's not an accessible path through there, so that would have to be constructed. I hope that answers the question, but I'm not sure.
That was great.
Okay.
Taking it to the north section, a question for Mike. Hi, I see all the trail work happening near Tuckahoe and Devon. Is the plan to pave the trail?
Hi, no, that's segment 1. We had a long discussion with the Forest Preserve District about whether or not this trail should be paved or remain unpaved. And we ended up developing design criteria to leave it unpaved, except at the immediate approaches of intersections where there are ADA tiles, where the grade exceeds 4% to avoid washouts, and where the path is inundated for significant amounts of time with floodwater, and therefore washes away the stone. So those would be the 3 areas on the trail that are paved. Everything else will remain as stone, but it's important that that stone meet ADA requirements, you know, as that's key to some of our funding structure. I also think the last question was probably for me regarding River Forest, the very south end of our study. The reason that is on street is because you are correct. The Forest Preserve is very nice in that area, too nice for a path. In the estimation of the resource people at the Forest Preserve, there's lots of threatened and endangered species in there, and other valuable resources. So they did not want a new path going through that area.
Thanks, Mike, for the extra information on that. Let's see what else we have. Just a kind of a comment as well. Residents might be able to keep municipal governments involved by contacting municipal planners, and that's a good recommendation as well too, to stay active as a community member with any trail plan happening in your area. I see one more question. I'm not sure who would be best to answer it, but I'm gonna just throw it out there. I'm concerned about parking lot safety at trailheads, particularly theft from vehicle. What are you doing to address this issue?
I can jump on that one. With regards to providing security at the lots, most of the engineering studies aren't addressing that. That's more of an enforcement issue with whatever municipalities in charge of the lots or the forest preserve themselves. But I think what is very important for all of these trail projects is to provide connector paths to the mainline trail so that you don't have to use the parking lots. You can hopefully leave your home, jump on a side path, cruise down Lawrence Avenue, and get to the trail that way. And that has been one of the more challenging parts of most of these trail projects is getting those connectors constructed, determining who's going to pay for them, who's going to maintain them, et cetera. So I think, I know that doesn't specifically answer your question, but that's something that can certainly help.
Thanks for that, Mike. It looks like we've gone through all our questions that we have. If anybody else wants to give a final question, we have about 3 minutes left. If not, it looks like we've gone through it without going over time. So just want to say a thank you to all our speakers and everybody who was able to join today.
Yeah, thanks so much. And stay tuned for future webinars as part of our trail webinar series. And we'll keep posting updates about the Des Plaines River Trail project on our website, activetrans.org/DPRT, and even at maybe some future trail webinars. If we learn about some exciting update about the DPRT, we'll alert you all. So yeah, thanks again, everyone, for attending, for our wonderful speakers, and yeah, we'll hopefully all together we'll eventually see this trail completed. So we're excited that we have a lot of wonderful people working on it. So thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For having me. Thanks, Maggie.
Thank you.
All right.